なたがこの手紙を読んでいるということは、きっとすべて片付いた頃ね。私がこの船にどんな思いを込めているのか、どうしてこの船をそんなに大切にしているのか、そんなことを何度も聞いてきたでしょ。ケルシー、私の答えはね、このロドスアイランドという船があなたの家になってほしいと願っていたからなの。
As touched upon in my Babel video, the themes of Arknights are ones of fate, which itself is portrayed through cyclical violence. Rather than being presented as an outside cosmic force that's inescapable, fate is instead portrayed as repeated actions of hate and negativity that keep us trapped repeating the same mistakes of the past over and over again. The older generations whose life is built upon the misfortune of the past can only lead us so far into the future without falling back on old habits, and so it is up to the future generations to carry the torch and let us break free. Amiya represents both the future and the key to escaping this cycle, a new generation that isn't tied down by wounds of the past, her desires stem from a pure place. Likewise, we see the loss that fate brings and the consequences of not letting go time and time again within the story. Through multiple destructions of Castel, through the old reunion, which had their identity and just cause tarnished by hatred and meddling from the old, as well as countless of other places, with the most recent global example being ending a Grand Overture. Seeing as I might be the only Baird fan in the community, I wish to use her short albeit impactful story to make my point. As part of the Glasgow Gang, Baird and her friends ran protection through violence, although the reasoning for it wasn't one born out of malice, but rather one born out of a desire to protect what's important to you. Baird is first introduced in Siege's module, although we don't see her appear in the story until chapter 12, taking care of Norport, which has been actively suffering under the occupation of the Sarkaz. Despite being a member of a gang that often solve things through force, her first reaction when civilians are being retreated from Norport is a selfless one. She remembers the streets she grew up in and immediately heads to a familiar spot to find McLaren, the owner of a videotape shop that has become deaf as a result of his oropathy. The story makes it clear that despite her best efforts to save him, even at the expense of her own safety, McLaren has become blinded by all of the ongoing cruelty, a metaphor touched upon in his physical state. Baird's attempts to help quite literally fall on deaf ears, as he stabs her not once but twice through a series of misunderstandings. This man, robbed of everything, would have acted the same even if his infection hadn't taken his hearing, and yet amidst everything, Baird does not forsake him or turn him away. She tells him to be careful to not hurt himself as he steals her belongings and yanks the knife out of her. She slowly bleeds out, hoping that she managed to save her life, and looks back to the fond memories of the past. Through this, we see Baird exist outside of the cycle of hate. Yet despite her good intentions, she still ends up being a victim of the ongoing troubles. Violence consumes all, both those that are perceived to deserve it, and even those close to you. Just as Baird's life is taken from her, her story is likewise forgotten. In Grand Overture, not even her body is recovered, her story is lost to time, and even the final message she leaves to the world finds itself swept up by the tide of war. It's a tragic story for a character overlooked by most fans, yet it's a touching tale that goes beyond the heroics of Vina and everyone else that fought in the war. Change begins through ordinary actions made by ordinary people. The way we treat others is the best way to prevent large-scale atrocities from happening. And it's for this very reason that the war ultimately ends in a ceasefire, allowing the Sarkaz to safely return home. By the end of the war, Siege, now known as Vina Victoria, enacts much needed change to Victoria, which desperately clings to its past glory and slowly withers as a result of it. The lack of monarchy, the introduction of ordinary people into parliament, and finally a brand new generation being given an opportunity to start life anew, are all necessary to bring the nation into an unknown yet hopeful future. The tale of the cloth puppet speaks volumes of the differences between Amiya and Theresa. Armed with a thread and string, the cloth puppet is a stand-in for Theresa within the confines of the story told to Amiya, and links back to the humble origins as a seamstress in Castel. This needlework is also referenced in her art, such as when causing the Doctor's amnesia is described as unraveling threads. I would even go so far as to link the fate weaving within mythology, considering the close nature of fate and the impact of Theresa's life and death in the Babel story. Naturally, the land that the cloth puppet traverses represents Castel, a cold and windy desert inhabited by black-cloaked shadows that wish to stop the puppet. These shadows, described as echoes of the oldest despair and sadness, represent the past struggles of the Sarkaz and the myriad souls by extension. They are the pain and anguish of Sarkaz history. Theresa states that if they catch you, you'll never escape them, likely because of the powerful pull that hatred and grudges can have on the direction of a person's life. This is one of the many differences between her and Amiya as bearers of the crown. Namely, Theresa's inability to escape the past tying her down and hampering the progress she wishes to make. Fearful that she may end up swept up in the cycle of hate, Theresa chooses to flee from the past rather than face it head on. It shows the overpowering nature that negativity and hate can have on one's mind, and being someone that has lived through those events, Theresa fears her ambitions and dreams are no match for the looming darkness holding her and her people back. The solution to this is boldly stated by the king, who herself doubts she is capable of achieving such a feat. Nevertheless, hope in the form of homeland for the Sarkaz is stated to be enough to dispel the fears and grudges of the past that manifest in the form of Theresa and his followers. It is why Kazdel struggles and civil war occurs in the first place, and why ultimately the crown is given to Amiya. Therefore, the tale of the cloth puppet begins as a story of Theresa's own life and shortcomings. Its parable is that not all stories have happy endings, and that certain fate can't be overcome. Yet Amiya, even at such a young age, or perhaps because of her young age, offers a different solution to Theresa's problems. Rather than panicking or giving up, the young courtice proposes to mend the wounds of the shadows and stitch them back together with the thread and needle that the cloth puppet carries. She wishes to rewrite their ending that Theresa herself thought is set in stone. It is ambitious yet hopeful, a dream born of someone that lives by the love and kindness of her upbringing rather than the pain and suffering that Sarkaz have experienced. If the puppet cured them and turned them into happy and peaceful shadows, then everybody could go to the plains of hope together. Sounds familiar, right? In letting go of hate and bridging the gaps between their differences, Amiya directly influences Theresa, who is much older and wiser as a person, a mother figure that ends up influenced by her daughter's traits. That innocence and hope of the young girl ultimately leads to Theresa replicating the solution that Amiya gave her. She enters the simulated universe and quite literally mends the wounds of the shadows by removing the lingering grievances of the myriad souls that continue to affect the Sarkaz. This allows the souls to move on, and with them their hatred. The Sarkaz outside even note that they feel a sudden sense of peace among themselves. It's by no means the end goal, yet it's a stepping stone towards her dreams that is only made possible through her conversation with Amiya and the young girl's ability to sway hearts. People speak different languages, and their hearts are not connected. The Tower of Babel is an etiology in which humanity, united under the same language and goals, decides to construct a tower as a hubristic act of defiance against God and the forces of nature. In doing so, God punishes humanity's pride by removing the linguistic homogeneity of humankind, creating language barriers and cultural differences that stop them from working together to finish the tower. In the case of Arknights, Babel draws many themes from its original story, although twists them ever so slightly. Theresa's pride and ambitions are ultimately her folly, unable to confront the pain of the past and ill-equipped to overcome the burdens that her people face. Theresa ultimately fails, her downfall brought around as a result of ideals she could never achieve on her own. The different languages that she speaks of in the tale of the cloth puppet speaks of the differences in approach that the people of Terra will lead, the different perspectives and lives that everyone leads, ultimately stopping unity of hearts and minds that could lead to peace. Yet differences alone are not the cause of hate. A younger Theresa is highly implied to have met the current Pope of Laterano, two races and nations that historically hate one another because of opposing ways of life and their histories together. These two leaders, despite having different outlooks on the world, ultimately formed the same conclusions of global peace, and managed to peacefully talk and part ways whilst maintaining their own stances. This is because individuality on its own is not a problem. Rather, it is the closed nature of people and inability to converse and understand one another that leads to hatred spawning. Language is therefore key. It is metaphor for bridging the gap between people through mutual understanding and love. Amiya remains the key to hope and kindness. She is the language, so to speak. Her positive outlook on life that isn't dragged down by the hate of the past allows her to open the minds of those around her. She manages to change the Doctor and Theresa for the better. She continues to lead Rhodes Island in a way that treasures connection and understanding between people, with no room for sacrifices. She creates home within Rhodes Island, a place of love and compassion that Theresa seeks out for the Sarkaz in the hopes that Calcit may find aboard the landship. A place of belonging where, regardless of background, everyone can live a fulfilling and peaceful life of coexistence.
"誰にも理解されなくとも、我々は皆、自らの道を見つけられる。ドクター、君も、君の道を見つけられるだろう。
Babel, just as Theresa, needed a successor to carry on its mission and unite the people. The Doctor of Babel begins his journey as the enigmatic god punishing Terra for its hubris. Their story begins by analyzing and learning all of the languages of the world, and though the Doctor is ultimately freed from this duty by Amiya and Theresa, he is also the one to crumble Theresa's tower for reaching too close for the truth. Rather than creating new languages, the Doctor opts to break down communication by perpetuating hatred and violence amongst the people. He states himself that he could have easily foiled the plans of the military commission at any point. Yet, rather than helping, it's through his actions that the Tower of Babel comes crashing down, that Theresa is killed, and that the war in Londinium even begins. Through his actions, the Sarkaz are once again viewed as a threat. Actions we will later work to undo, mind you. This imagery is bolstered in Cowsit's promotion records, which state that Babel loses its ability to function as a pillar, a tower to unite the Sarkaz and the nations of the world after the events of the Civil War and Theresa's death. To that purpose, Amiya's succession of Theresa is vital for the future of Terra, just as Rhodes Island's new approach at uniting the people is important for the future that she envisioned. Having been raised in an environment of love and understanding, Amiya's ideals are based on those she inherited from Theresa, yet they remain pure and untainted, detached from the hatred and violence of Sarkaz history. It's a role she has to grow into. Amiya's youth is the reason she can lead people into the future, yet it also means she has a long road to walk before she can achieve her dreams, a road she walks alongside us as the player. We see this in her design. She's the only operator to have separate E1 art, for instance. Her initial design appears timid. She wears oversized clothes that she's yet to grow into, symbolic of the role she's been placed in, and her face carries a vibe of uncertainty. Of note is the amount of devices she wears to suppress her arts and neuropathy. Most operators will have just one or two of these, yet Amiya possesses two on her legs, one on her neck, and one on each finger. Even before we find out about the crown and its importance, the game makes it clear that Amiya is no ordinary Cordis. Her E1 art appears a little more energetic, yet she still looks confused and out of place. Patterns begin to emerge behind her, likely forming an incomplete symbol of Originium. They remain shaky and disconnected, the shape only just beginning to form, just as Amiya's own resolve and place in the world is slowly forming. It's around this time that the bunny is tested against Skullshatterer and Frostnova. Her E2 art instead presents a much more confident Amiya that has begun to accept her place in the world. She stares outwardly without hesitation, the art itself representing her showdown against the Black Snake at the end of Chapter 8. The symbol of Originium is now high in the air behind her as she finally decides to use the crown to achieve her goals rather than fearing its drawbacks. Noteworthy are the split clouds, which are being burned away by the flames encircling her. In literature, clouds are a versatile symbol that can represent a range of emotions and ideas. Here they foreshadow the change to come, the mystery of the world and the hidden truths waiting to be revealed. They serve to show the shifting nature of Amiya, and so to burn the clouds away is to reveal the truth of the world and to purge the hatred from it. Violence bred from delusion, lies, and a general lack of knowledge stands in her way, and it is her duty to pave the way for the future, to show people a brighter tomorrow and a truth of kindness that can bridge them together. Now, this part of the video is unscripted, but I'd like to just very quickly break away to talk about the music related to Amiya and Civilite Eterna. Civilite Eterna as an operator are the memories of Theresa brought forward by the Crown. Therefore, it's safe to say that they represent what Theresa was like during her life, even if there is a distinction between Theresa herself and the manifestation of her memories. Therefore, in the OST for Civilite Eterna, we see an overlap between Amiya's ideals and Theresa's ideals, specifically the line, "and will burn the clouds away." It shows up in Ralphus Surreal and Flame, and it shows up in the OST for Civilite Eterna. Moreover, the leitmotif for Ralphus Surreal and Flame shows up again in succession, and once again as the IS-5 boss theme for Amiya. It represents great change that the bunny goes through, or the differences in life that she experiences. In the case of Ralphus Surreal and Flame in Chapter 8, it's her accepting the crown, but not yet accepting the position of Sarkaz King. And therefore, in succession, that's when she truly understands what she wants to do as Lord of the Fiends, and what will later play into why she manifests a sword the first time around, a weapon of war showcasing the troubled past of Kazdal and past Sarkaz kings. Therefore, in succession, Amiya finally decides the kind of king she wants to become, the Lord of the Fiends for the people, through peace, not through violence. But regardless, I'm going to compare the clips side by side, and then I will go back to the main video. The song that plays in chapter 14 for Amiya's class transition, featuring her leitmotif, is called Succession, and I don't believe that's a coincidence. We see in her god form that Amiya starts to take the first steps forward in her journey, yet at that point in time, her power from the crown is not yet her own. Civilite Eterna amounts to a highly advanced information storage unit, and Amiya's god form utilizes the past of the Sarkaz to create a Vambrace's sword from one of the past Sarkaz kings. It is power, but it's not yet her own power. It's power that is built upon the past of the Sarkaz that she realistically should avoid. Most importantly, it manifests a sword, a tool of war that is not suitable for the young bunny to wield. Therefore, Amiya's medic form is an important step forward for her character. She wears a dress gifted to her by Theresa, and she changes it to her own liking, just as she wears Theresa's ideals, yet molds them to her own shape. Rather than a weapon of war, this Amiya opts for a staff that, to my understanding, does not come from the crown. It represents her and her place in the world, as unlike a sword, a staff is not inherently a weapon of war. Amiya has become a shepherd ready to lead lambs to salvation. In her operator art, we see Theresa stepping down and officially passing the torch to the new Lord of Fiends. Moreover, in front of Amiya are two symbols, one white and one black. If I had to make a guess, they represent both Theresa and Theresa's, and so Amiya, being the center of the image, shows her place in the story. A Lord of Fiends that values the experience of both siblings, yet chooses to lead a middle path of understanding. More importantly, the threads that were once Theresa's are now controlled by Amiya, showing how she has matured into the role placed upon her. I do believe it's also no surprise that Amiya's powers with the crown are initially shown to be those of empathy, the understanding of others, and the ability to ease their burdens. Ultimately, Amiya walks a path of coexistence and understanding, the middle way, so to speak. As a king, she's recognized by none, barring a very small amount that have directly interacted with her, yet it's through this interaction that her subjects harbor a genuine desire to follow her example, rather than looking up to the crown for the curse that it is. Historically, it has represented the suffering of the Sarkaz, though this isn't the position that Amiya wishes to fill. She lives outside of that. She isn't a Sarkaz, yet she was raised by one in Kazdel. She knows of the struggles of the people she wishes to save on a very personal level, yet she isn't affected by them to a degree that would cause personal bias. Really, Amiya has no place in the world other than the one she creates for herself. Rhodes Island has become her home, and with those lessons, she aims to achieve what Theresa wanted, to create a home for everyone through dialogue, love, and understanding. The recent addition of IS-5 has only further cemented Amiya's place on Terra. We know that in a world where she wasn't shown kindness and instead grew up in an environment of hate, Amiya's ideals were twisted. Ironically, a girl that usually stands as a pillar of hope ends up completing the prophecy that Patriot fears and destroys Terra in the process of doing so. Luckily for us, this isn't the timeline we play in, but it does show the importance of some of the themes and topics I've discussed in this video. I don't think Amiya is the most interesting character in Arknights, though that isn't to say that I think she's boring either. In a sense, I believe Amiya is the glue that holds the story together, a central figure representing the core themes of Rhodes Island and the game itself. And naturally, the world lives on without her. Just as we see with Calcit and Talulah, no amount of personal power is ever enough to change the world in a meaningful manner. Instead, she's a symbol of the new generation, leading by example and hoping to sway hearts of others to follow a similar path. She's a beacon for hope and the future. She represents the struggles of escaping fate. Change is a gradual process after all, and one of the best ways to achieve it is to educate those that come after you without hampering their individuality, to pass on the reins to those ready to find their own place in the world, and most importantly, to create an environment where language and dialogue between people is cherished. A home for all, so to speak. So, Doctor, there is still much work to be done for the future of Terra. Babel's mission is concluded, and you and the Slantship have only just set sail.
今、あなたが初めに抱いた疑問を解き明かす時なんじゃないかしら。長い長い夜の後には、ロドスアイランドにもきっと夜明けが訪れるわ。